This is the Lockpicking Lawyer, and what I have for you today is a really unusual vintage French lock. This is called a central. It came in two different variants, a 5-pin and a 7-pin variant. This is the 5-pin. Now the really cool part about this lock isn't necessarily the mechanism, which is somewhat unusual for those of us in the US, more common in Europe. But what's really cool about it is the key. It has one of the most interesting looking keys I've ever seen. We have a bow that's reminiscent of a handcuff key. Then extending from that is a steel rod from which 6 fins extend. Now the fin at the 12 o'clock position is the tensioning fin, and then each of the others has a different length, and those are the bidding fins. So to use this, all we would do is insert the key into the lock, turn it, and of course the bolt moves. Now, while this looks really interesting and unusual, what we find in here is actually just a really strange tubular lock. We can look right down the keyway, and I think you can see 5 pins. Let me actually put some light in there for you. You can see we have 5 pins. So picking this is just like a tubular lock, except we have less pins to deal with, so it shouldn't be too hard. The only complication is that we do have to turn the key a full 360 degrees to remove the bolt from this little housing that it goes into. So we're actually going to have to pick this 6 times. Luckily for us, it's easy enough to pick that picking it 6 times really isn't that much of a chore. Now, as for the format of this lock, this is a relatively common lock format in Europe, though we rarely see it in the US. What we have here is the lock cylinder, which goes through a hole that you drill in the door. Then on the far side, we have the thumb turn. And to use it, what you do is press down on the thumb turn. That disengages the locking mechanism from the lock cylinder. And once we do that, you just turn it and it opens up. Pretty simple. Okay, so let's see what we can do to pick into this. Interestingly, the Pulford treatise on this lock says that they're pretty hard to tension, and that's not what I found at all. I just took a normal little tension wrench like this, bent it back at about 90 degrees, and we have the perfect tension tool for this. We just insert this into the place where the tensioning fin would go, and we are ready to start picking. So the first time we pick this, we have to pick all 5 pins, and each subsequent time we pick it, we're only going to have to pick 4. There's 1, and I don't know if you noticed, that bolt moved just a little bit. Let's keep going. Oh, there we go, a little bit more. Got it moved a little bit more. As you can see, picking this once is not very difficult. The only reason this lock has any pick resistance at all is because you do have to pick it so many times. I think I overset one of those. There we go. I think that was the 4th time we picked it, so we should just have 2 more. There we go, the full 360 degrees. I didn't time that, but we got through that pretty darn quickly. Okay, let's take this apart and I will show you what's inside of this. We can start by removing this lock housing, and that should just be these 4 screws. Let's loosen them up, and then I'll just twirl them out pretty quickly. Okay, we should be able to take this back plate out now. It's sticking just a little bit, so let me give it a little encouragement. There we go. Okay, there's the spring that pushes the thumb turn outward. Here we have the back of the locking mechanism. And if we take a look at the way this locking mechanism works, you can see it's a pretty nice solid steel bolt that goes all the way across. And we just have a little, I don't even know what to call it. I guess that's a gear mechanism that turns it. Okay, let's put that aside and concentrate on getting this lock cylinder out. We've got 3 more screws here. And 2 more screws now. It's the never-ending Russian doll of screws. Hopefully this is the end of it. And I can feel a lot of spring tension here. There we go. So all 5 springs from behind the 5 pin chambers are here. Let's start by taking those springs out. And I am going to put them, I'll call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are all very long and actually very powerful springs. Let's try to dump out the pins from slot 1. And I think I got a little bit more than that. I'm not sure where that other one came from, but I guess we'll find out soon enough. That's obviously a driver pin. We have really long key pins here. There we go. Okay, nothing particularly unusual about these pins except for their sheer size. They're very thick and of course very long. Now to get the rest of this mechanism apart, I think we need to remove this screw. For a lock that has the age of this, I'm assuming this is from the late 60s or early 70s, it's actually in remarkably good shape. Okay. So here we have the front of the lock, and this is where we would insert the key. You can see how each of those fins would engage the bitting surfaces of the pins. And what we're trying to do is line up the shear line in between this ring and this ring. So back here is where all our driver pins and springs would sit while the lock is in the open position. Okay, let me give you a close-up of all of this. Okay, as you can see, all of these key pins and actually driver pins all appear to be standard. There might be a serration on driver pin number 2. I'm not sure about that, or maybe that's just a line that appeared with age. But the remarkable thing about these is the size. They're all very, very large pins, and the springs are quite large as well. If we move up here, you can see the front of the lock. This is made out of steel, I'm assuming to provide some drill resistance. Then we have the back of it, I guess what we would normally call the lock body, where all of the springs and driver pins would rest when the lock's in the open position. Nothing particularly unusual on the inside of this housing, but the real show with this is one of the coolest looking keys I've ever seen. So that's all I have for you today. If you do have any questions or comments about this, please put them below. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe. And as always, have a nice day. Thank you.